Right now I'm going to show you how to rig this character that we have. First thing we need to do is create the biped for it. What I'd like to do is go to the object and freeze it and make it see-through so that we don't accidentally select meshes or any of that while we're making the biped. So now we're going to go grab the biped. And then we're going to make sure we're stuck in figure mode. If you're not in figure mode, any edits or changes you do to the rig won't be saved. So then when you do go to edit mode, it'll erase all that. So you want to make sure that you're in figure mode and working inside of it. So now what we're going to try to do is align the Biped 1 to the hips. Once we get that in a nice good place, we want to scale the pelvis. You want to try and get the pivots of the thigh bone and the pelvis. You want that to be able to where it runs all the way down to the foot. You want it to be pretty straight. You don't want your leg to be slightly like that or like this. You want it to be pretty straight. You want the impact of the ball of the heel to be right over the pivot of the pelvis. Now we just need to check the length of our limbs here. Since this is a gang model, we don't need to worry about having numerous toe digits. We could just have one toe digit to get the effect that we need. The whole idea of rigging up a game model is to keep your rig very low bone count, keep it very consolidated with a performance in mind. The shin bone in the same orientation as I see for the shin. So I'm kind of just looking at this line right here of these polys, and I want to make the orientation of the axis, primarily the z-axis, to line up with it. So I'm just going to rotate it a little bit so it's aligned like that. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the thigh bone. I'm going to scale the toe because this is where our pivot's going to be, with the metal chunk. So we can just scale that up pretty long. Doesn't need to be perfect or look flashy or anything like that. And then we can scale the foot up a little bit wider. Scale the shin up. I tend to just do this a little bit because in the end, when I animate it or do my rigging, I usually convert all these to boxes anyway. So right now we need to get our spine all set up. First thing I'm going to do is set this down to 3 links. The whole idea is try to simulate a real spine. So what I'm going to do is scale these down so that way my pivot for this spine ends up to the pivot of this rib cage area right here. So the whole idea is try to make it work towards, starts off small and then gets bigger. So I'm going to try and get this bone a little bit shorter. And this bone to be a little bit longer. And then rotate it back some a little bit for the arch. So now I'm trying to just get the joints for the neck and the spine meet to fit the mesh. And just trying to get an idea of what a real skeleton will look like inside of a human in real life in terms of what would work in here. So we need to get the position of our neck in a place. And what we want to do is follow the jawline of our mesh until we meet where the base of the head is. So we can see that the base of the head and the neck on the mesh is probably about right here. So we want to get the pivots of our biped and meet in that area. Sometimes it helps rotate the bones, get an idea of what the mesh or the rotation will look like on the mesh. The neck and the head bone skeleton looks kind of funny right now, but we're not really concerned about it. All we care about is the pivot points. Since I tend to turn the skeleton into a box later on, we won't see that anyway. So now we need to focus on the arm. So we need to hide this mesh out of the way, make it a little bit easier to see what we're doing, and then freeze the mesh back up. So now what I'm going to do is try to move the collarbone into place that fits appropriate to the mesh. So now we need to add fingers. So this is a pretty generic human hand. So we're going to go with 5 fingers. And then 3 finger links. So now I need to move the thumb into place. And now I'm trying to determine the top of the thumb. And then use the local orientation of my rotation on the biped bone to line it up. You want to try and get the pivots of your bones to meet up where the verts are on the mesh, so that way the blending of the verts will be a little more suitable. Same idea with the finger joints. We want to have the joint of these 2 digits. They go right here where this vert is, so that it'll be blending pretty evenly between the 2 bones when we start skinning. So now that we got most of our limbs done, we still need to do the opposite sides. But all you have to do for that is just copy and paste. This is copy posture, and then we're going to paste posture opposite. And then we're going to do the same thing for the leg. So you're really only doing half the work, which is good. So now that I've finished creating my biped, I've went ahead and created some extra bones that we'll be using for our props. Props like the shoulder pad, codpiece, the head, and the sword. So one thing to keep in mind when you're creating your prop bones is that you may have to move that pivot point in an area that works best with your rig. So for example, I have my pivot point towards the bottom of the bone, so that when I rotate, the shoulder pad will rotate on the pivot like it's bolted into the shoulder. And then the same thing for the codpiece. I have it rotating towards the top of the bone axis, so it looks like it's hanging from a belt. Same thing for the head. I have it rotating towards the top. So these are things that you might have to change on your mesh. It's very simple to do. All you have to do is just go to the hierarchy panel and then go Effect Pivot Only. And then you're able to move or rotate the pivot however you feel. So after we've created our prop bones, go ahead and make sure that you name these bones with appropriate naming convention. For example, I have a shoulder bone. For this piece I have codpiece bone. This will help when we start adding bones in the skin modifier. So once you have all your bones created and named properly, I like to go ahead and have everything display as box. So you go to Object Properties and then Display as Box. That just really helps for when you're starting to rig your mesh and you won't be able to see the weights and everything involved. So now we're ready to add the skin modifier. So what we need to do is unfreeze our mesh.